forever. Maybe. I don't think they have any other 7-3 classes. Maybe they do. All right, you guys. Make sure everything's streaming. Something to consider. So this class is meant to simplify, as you can tell, now that we're 90% over, a lot of concepts in kinesiology, fitness, rehab, that it gets played fast and loose with, and I'm here to try to help clarify and explain so we could use them as tools when we're helping people. Every person in this class outside of, if you, heck, even if you change your mind and you become a realtor, you're going to be helping people, okay? So we want to make sure we're clear on these concepts so that we can be more optimal at helping people. So today we're going to talk about plyometrics. And traditionally you think of plyometrics as like box jumps, explosive type of exercises, because that's what kind of gets entrenched in our layman's terms. But it doesn't have to be extreme. Everything's a continuum. So in other words, if I say the term going run, does that mean sprinting? It could be a jog. It could be, it could be a marathon. It could be a 100-meter sprint. It could be an 800, a 400. Like there's different continuums of run. So it's the same with plyometrics. What plyometrics really means, and I tried to put it on the little presentation I did today, is just a sequence of contraction types, specifically eccentric, putting on the brake of an agonist, changing direction, and concentric, speeding up in the other direction. And then on Monday, I said that's the only two things that a muscle can do back to back. Once it creates motion in its direction of pull, it can turn off. It can stop pulling as much to let gravity slow it down, but it can't push it to a stop. So an end of a range of motion can put it to a stop. The antagonist or the other muscles could put it to a stop. The machine could put it to a stop, but the muscle can't speed you up and push you to a stop. So the only thing that a muscle can do back to back where it's responsible for the change in direction is eccentric slowing down and concentric slowing up, speeding up. Now in explosive stuff, that happens very rapidly and with high amounts of force in short amount of time. But the plyometric sequence can occur slowly, like when you're just doing an exercise, just doing any type of exercise where the agonist is like, okay, it's time to stop that motion one way, change the direction and speed up the motion the other. And in fact, if you're giving a lot of effort, maybe your face or your body can feel it where you lower it down and then you start to give more effort to bring it back up. That's because your muscles have to work greater than the weight to slow it down as it goes down and then change its direction to speed it up as it goes up. The concentric phase, the entire phase, your muscles don't have to keep working hard the whole time. I use the analogy of moving furniture. And I'll redirect the camera, but no external force is trying to move this table, so I have to move the table. So I'm going to have to use some concentric contraction of stuff. But this is more of a metaphor. The hardest thing to do is just to get the table going. It's not as hard to keep it going, and it's even easier to let it stop pushing, and it's going to stop. Does that make sense? But if I was lowering the table down, right? If I'm trying to lower the table down and I don't want it to hit the ground, then I'm going to let it down and then I have to give more effort to bring it to a stop. My muscles have to put on the brake. Okay, so that's the difference here. The plyometric sequence is pretty easy. It should hopefully make some sense. We've already talked about taking a movement in layman's terms and breaking it down to actually there's two movements in a range of motion. We've done that before. So in other words, someone's like the movement of a lat pull down. Well, there's two movements at the shoulder, there's two movements at the elbow, there's flexion, extraction, so breaking it down there. We've also broken it down to concentric phase, eccentric phase, involved with those muscles influencing that motion. On Monday, I mentioned that what speeds up must slow down. So all we're doing is looking at the individual phases and saying, hey, there's going to be a speed up and there's going to be a slowdown. And when you're trying to do things slow and controlled, there's also going to be a cruise control. There's going to be a time where you're trying to keep the same speed. You're moving furniture and you're going to speed it up and you're going to try to keep it going at the same speed, then you'll let it slow down. For exercises, you're going to speed it up. You're going to try to keep the same speed, then it's going to slow down. Then you're going to speed up, try to keep the same speed, then you're going to slow down. Okay? So today's lecture is just looking at that and looking at when you change direction, what speeds up has to slow down. There has to be a slowdown on one motion so that you could have speed up of the other. That's all we're getting at. Okay? I have this analogy that I pulled up for the plyometric sequence. Has anybody ever played with the paddle ball? It has the string on it and you're trying to bump it. The string represents how muscles work, not the paddle. Because remember, muscles can only pull. So when you hit that ball, the string gets lengthened, slows the ball down as it goes away from you, changes its direction, and speeds the ball up coming back to you. That would be the plyometric sequence of the string represented by a muscle. The paddle is going to change its direction, not the string when it gets close to the paddle, right? The paddle has to hit it. But once it moves away, because muscles and strings pull, the string is going to slow it down and then speed it up. The string will only pop when it's getting pulled apart. Like the ball's not going to come back and the string pop. The string is only going to break if it gets too far away, being pulled away, and then pow. And that represents our muscles too. That's when you're going to have the most damage. Microscopically, the late onset muscle soreness, that's all muscle fibers being pulled apart. And macroscopically, when you rupture a tendon or tear a muscle, it's being pulled apart. It's breaking motion one way so that it can speed up motion the other. So far, so bad? Yay. Let's continue. So I tried to lay it out specifically. If we know or if we learn plyometrics is eccentric slowing down, immediately followed by concentric speeding up. The reason you want to do it immediately is that you can tap into the stretchy material of the muscle to get extra force to change the direction. Stored elastic potential energy can't be conserved forever. What I mean by that is if you have like silly putty or stretchy stuff and you pull it apart, if you notice, it doesn't start to sag right away, but after a little bit, it'll start to sag, right? If you hold a push-up and you hold it for an extended period of time, all of that stretchy material that you can tap into as you hold the stretch starts to dissipate and release. That's why when you're stretching, you try to hold it for a while to let the stored elastic stuff kind of simmer down so that you can take the range of motion more. So changing direction immediately helps our muscles by tapping into the stretchy rubber band-like materials that our muscles have to change our direction, okay? So it's not just eccentric followed by concentric. That's not what plyometrics is about. It's not just this phase followed by this phase. No, it's not the entire eccentric followed by the entire concentric. It's very specifically eccentric of that agonist to slow down motion one way, immediately followed by concentric contraction of the same agonist to speed up motion the other. Specifically changing direction because your muscles change your direction. Make sense? So I have some examples. So I think that's important. Here's an exercise we've done several times. What's our agonist? Well, what's the machine trying to do to my knees? Flex me or extend me? Absolutely. Do I need knee flexors? Need knee extensors. Okay, so my agonist are my knee extensors. My concentric phase, I'm going to see knee extension, ABC. My eccentric phase, I'm going to see knee flexion, ABC. So now let's look into those specific windows of the flexion and the extension and the concentric and the eccentric. This range of motion, or this exercise, is just fluctuating between flexions and extensions. What I'm trying to get you guys to do is acknowledge or see that to go from extension to flexion, I got to slow down extension so that I can speed up flexion. And I got to slow down flexion to speed up extension. I have to stop motion one way so that I can create motion the other. There are two changes of direction: slowing down extension to speed up flexion, and then slowing down flexion to speed up extension. One way to look at seeing the plyometric sequence is what change of direction could happen with the external force. In other words, what change in direction do I not even need my muscles? And that's when her knees are with her feet are at the highest. The machine can slow down her extension and speed up the flexion. Does that make sense? She can turn off, if she's extending with her muscles, she can turn off those muscles and the machine can bring her back down. Does that make sense? That's almost like the machine's plyometric sequence. My muscles, though, have to slow down my flexion and speed up the extension. There should be a big hint on this. The flexion was the eccentrics. The flexion was the eccentrics. So in other words, my plyometric sequence is going to involve something to do with flexion followed by something to do with extension. True? It's one way to look at it. And we also know that it's slowing down motion through eccentrics, or putting on the brake, followed by putting on the gas. So I'm trying to walk you down a path of clues that for that exercise, it's logical that my plyometric sequence, where in that exercise will my muscles be working the hardest? Where in that exercise will my muscles be having the most micro damage? There's a specific window, there's a specific position, and that's when the knees are mostly flexed, the most flexed position. We are going to assume she's not clanging. We're going to assume there's no clanging. We're going to assume that there's constant tension. But that's important for us to know as clinicians. Where in the range of motion? She's not working the muscles. She's working the same muscles in this exercise, but she's not working those muscles the same amount of effort in the range of motion. There's another way to look at what I'm trying to get you to see. There's going to be periods where it's going to be easier, and then there's going to be periods where it's harder. Okay? Any questions with this first example? On the test, I'm going to need you to see agonists. I'm going to need you to see contractions. I'm going to need you to see how muscles influence motion through contraction. And then finally, I need you to be able to identify where in a range of motion would the plyometric sequence of an agonist happen. Where would the work be the hardest? And that's when the muscles have to change your direction, when your muscles have to change your direction. Her flexion turns into extension because her muscles turned it. Her extension turned into flexion because the machine could do it. Does that make sense, the difference? Let's look at another one, similar but different. We've had this before, but now we're just going into the rabbit hole a little bit more with plyometric sequences. External force trying to extend my knees. I need my knee flexion pullers, my knee flexors for this exercise. My flexors are going to do flexion through concentric. My flexors are going to do the extension to eccentric. So now all we're saying is that, okay, well, to do another flexion, I got to slow down an extension, and to do another extension, I got to slow down a flexion. What speeds up must slow down. One of those changes in direction, the machine can do by itself. I don't need my muscles to do it. But the other one, my muscles have to be responsible for. My muscles have to change my direction by actually working more than the weight. So my plyometric sequence for my knee flexors would be slowing down the extension through eccentrics, putting on the brake, changing my direction, and speeding up the flexion through concentrics. It's specifically that window. It's not the entire extension followed by the entire flexion. It's specifically that area of change direction. That's when you're actually curling more than the weight. Your muscle has to work more than the weight to change that direction. That's where you're going to have the most damage. And guys, damage is good. I'm not saying damage is bad. We have to damage so that we can grow and get stronger and better. So I'm not inferring damage is a bad thing. But we need to understand where these windows of greater and less happen, because maybe we want to modify the exercise. Maybe instead of doing a full range of motion, maybe we do want to put on the brake earlier so that we can get a plyometric sequence in a different range of motion. Maybe. If we're rehabbing a certain muscle that got injured at a certain angle, maybe we do want to plyometrically sequence eventually at that angle. We need to know how to be able to do these things. I'm not going to ask you that on the test. I'm trying to give you foresight on why this can be important. That's all. So let's go. So this would be like, am I running? Yes, but I'm jogging. So let's go to an example where I might be sprinting, a more traditional plyometric type of example, right? Just, maybe you're just doing some vertical jumps. So when the person jumps up, that's going to be concentric knee extensors, hip extensors, right? What I want to look at is when they come back down, when they hit the ground, it's not a full range of motion like in the other ones. However, when you hit the ground, you want to slow down the flexion at the knees, change your direction, and speed up the extension at the knees. Plyometric sequence. The knee extensors put on the brakes, change the direction, and put on the gas. Your hip extensors put on the brakes, change the direction, and put on the gas. It's just happening in less time. It's faster. It's just more of a sprint on the continuum, but it's the same concept. Eccentric brake followed by concentric gas. Make sense? So is plyometrics a separate contraction? No, we only have 3 contractions. It's a specific sequence. And it has to be that sequence. It's the only thing a structure with tension or pull force can do back to back. We'll go back one more time to the paddle ball. The only thing that string can do back to back is slow down the ball while it goes away from the paddle and speed up the ball coming to the paddle. Once it speeds up the ball to the paddle, something else has to change its direction. Another string maybe, in this case the paddle, but the only thing that string can do back to back is be lengthened followed by shortening. The rubber band cannot lengthen itself. Something has to lengthen it, and then the rubber band can shorten. Make sense? Would y'all like to see a few more examples? And we could try to practice identifying agonist, practice identifying contraction, and then maybe go into, hey, where would the plyometric sequence specifically be? Okay. Let's see. Just, oh yeah, I had this one fired up. Going. What is the first clue? We're detectives, we're kinesiology detectives. The first clue What is the external force trying to do to you? True? Okay. So let's have a trunk conversation because I see the inference of trunk motion in this exercise, in these movements. Okay. What is the dumbbell trying to do to this animation's trunk? Bend it or twist it? Bend it. How is it trying to bend it? To the left. True? They're left. Do you think I would need muscles that are also trying to bend me to the left? I need muscles that are trying to bend me to the right. I'm not using muscles on the same side of that dumbbell. I'm using muscles on the opposite side of the dumbbell. It'd be like a teeter-totter. If something's trying to pull the teeter-totter this way, wouldn't I need something on the other side to pull back the other way? So I establish my agonist. I know that I need left lateral trunk benders because the dumbbell's trying to bend me. I'm sorry, right lateral because the dumbbell's trying to left lateral. See, I was just seeing if y'all were paying attention. We're good so far? Now that I've established my agonist, motion during this exercise isn't going to be because of different muscles. It's going to be because those same muscles are doing different types of contractions. Okay? My right lateral trunk benders are going to be working concentrically when I see right lateral trunk bend. So if the person is here, bent to the left, they got to make themselves bend to the right. A dumbbell's not trying to make them bend to the right. A dumbbell's trying to make them bend to the left. So if I actually observe right lateral trunk bending, it has to be through concentric contraction. There's no, it's just mechanics. Got to be. Unless you are Harry Potter, I guess, they might be able to do it. Left lateral has to be through eccentric contraction because my right lateral benders are going to allow left lateral through eccentrics. Concentric make me come up. Eccentric let me go down for this example. Now let's talk plyometric sequence. The plyometric sequence is going to be when your muscles specifically change your direction. It's going to be an eccentric followed by a concentric, but it's going to be a specific window of break followed by gas. Slowing down the left lateral because my right lateral's got to pull more than the weight. Slowing down the left, changing my direction and speeding up the right. In other words, the plyometric sequence is going to be down here. Up here, gravity can change my direction. Like once I get it moving up, I can turn off everything and gravity's like, I got you. But gravity can't do that. My muscles have to do that. My muscles have to change my direction down here. That's when my muscles are going to... Why is that important? To identify that area of slow down and speed up because your muscles have to work more than the weight. Your muscles have to work more to slow you down. Your muscles have to put on the brake. And that's when you're going to have damage microscopically, soreness. But again, that's good. Soreness isn't that, well, I mean, I guess soreness can be bad. But that's why we exercise. That's why we do stuff, is to have a little damage. Our body sends a little inflammatory response. I'm oversimplifying the heck out of it. And we fix it a little stronger so that we can maybe not have as much damage next time. Let's try. Okay, what if I ask the question like this? Would the plyometric sequence of her muscles slowing down motion one way, followed by speeding up motion the other, Would that occur when her hands are high or when her hands are low? Don't answer right away. Give it some thought. If I ask the question like that, the plyometric sequence, eccentric slowing down motion, followed by concentric speeding up motion of an agonist, would that occur when her hands are at the highest position in this exercise or when her hands are at the lowest position in this exercise? Give that a few seconds of thought. High or low?
High.
High. Hello, high. That's when it was the highest. Her muscles are going to have to slow down the flexion, change the direction, and speed up the extension. Once you have that extension going, the exercise can slow down the extension and speed up the flexion. Does that make sense? Let me ask you this, or let me put it another way. At the bottom, wouldn't that be changing direction of extension then flexion? Yes or no? Work with me. I'm trying to walk you down a path to see it differently. Wouldn't at the bottom be extension followed by flexion? Yeah? Good. Well, what muscles am I working in this exercise? Not flexors. I'm working extensors, true? Because the machine's trying to flex me. So wouldn't I need extensors? So by default, that would be concentric followed by eccentric. You see what I'm trying to get to? Like, in other words, it couldn't be at the bottom because that's concentric followed by eccentric. I'm just trying to help you guys get right answers by understanding these concepts. Flexion followed by extension would fit. Eccentric followed by concentric. So I'm even showing you that if it's tough to see, understandable, but there are enough clues for you to eliminate and figure out. Thanks for the feedback. It gets awkward when it's silent. How about this one? Yoink, 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 yoink. That's a clever. See if I can do a little before that. That's not bad. All right, guys. So this exercise, the machine is going to be trying to extend my elbows the entire time, whether I'm flexing, whether I'm extending, or whether I'm just holding this position for the photo. So I don't need extension pullers. I need flexion pullers. Campbell, why don't you say tricep or bicep? Because nowhere in those Latin names does it suggest how they pull. And so we're starting off by seeing who do I need to pull. Once we have that well and good, then we'll go to Latin names of things. I need flexion pullers, and it's more than the bicep. I need flexion pullers. We're good? When I see flexion, it's going to be concentric. Flexors do flexion through concentrics. When I don't see any motion at all, but those muscles are still doing a job, those flexors are preventing the machine from extending me through isometrics. Those are the easiest. The hardest one are eccentrics. And guys, it's in the name. Eccentric just means different. It means odd. That's weird how a muscle pulling one way can be responsible for motion another. It's a curveball. But the muscle is not lengthening itself. That's so important to understand. The muscle can't lengthen itself. A rubber band cannot lengthen itself. That machine is trying to lengthen it, and that muscle can resist it being lengthened. Eccentric phase of this exercise, extension. Concentric phase, flexion. So my plyometric sequence is going to be slowing down the extension followed by speeding up the flexion. It's going to be here. True? In fact, I know some of you, or if you've ever done any kind of curls, when do you take a break? You don't take a break with it here. You know what I mean? Like you kind of catch your breath at one last rep. You don't do it here. You change your direction. You catch your breath here. Stretch, 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 stretch. Get some extra force from that stored elastic potential energy. Okay. See what I'm getting at? Slowing down the extension and speeding up your flexion took your muscles to do it. Better? Let's do try to do let's do some rotated cuff stuff. Something different. All right. I'm going to fluctuate between rotation of my shoulder in this exercise, internal, external, external, internal, that kind of stuff. So I just want to make sure we see we're not doing this. Right? We're just doing internal and external rotation. The cable, the TheraBand, is trying to do what to the shoulder? What motion is that external pull trying to do? Internal rotation. It's trying to internally rotate me. I don't need internal rotation pullers. I need external rotation pullers. This exercise would be targeting, innervating, exercising my external rotators. Who are those muscles? We'll talk about them eventually. But I don't think infraspinatus and teres minor infer that they're pulling in its direction of external rotation. Posterior fibers of the delta. You see what I'm saying? We have to look at it as I need muscles that pull in a direction of external rotation. They are a group of muscles, then we'll learn their names in biomechanics. I need external rotators in my right shoulder. So when I observe external rotation, it's going to be concentric phase. When I observe internal rotation, it's going to be eccentric phase. My plyometric sequence of my external rotators in this exercise is going to be slowing down the internal rotation, followed by speeding up the external rotation. Putting on the brake of internal through eccentrics, followed by putting on the gas of external through concentric. And again, I want to clarify, it's not the entire range of motion followed by the entire range of motion. It's specifically when you have to change your direction. Okay, how about this one? We're going to do the high and low game again. Plyometric sequence. When the hand is high or when the hand is low. Don't answer it right away. Give it some thought. Also, let's take into account that he's not holding a position. So here, 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 constant motion. Constant movement because we're limited, guys, we're not like a tire. We can't just keep spinning in the same direction. Our wheels have to rotate, recock, rotate, recock, rotate. Okay. So there's going to be, during, let's say he does 10 reps, there's just going to be a constant fluctuation between ab and adduction. Is he working the ab pullers or the ad pullers? Ab pullers. And again, we're going to talk about who those muscles are, but if I just say deltoid, supraspinatus, it doesn't say what they're doing. It's just a name. Okay? Does anybody have a question on why we'd be working abduction pullers on the left shoulder? Okay. My concentric phase of those abduction pullers is going to be when I observe abduction. This is going to be the concentric phase. And the eccentric phase is going to when I observe adduction. Because of that. Because I'm helping you to see it through logic. So my plyometric sequence is going to be specifically, okay, slowing down the ad and then speeding up the ab. Does that make sense? So when my hand is the lowest. Now, some of you may say, well, wait, wouldn't like the soft end point of the, yeah, I was trying to find a picture right. So let's just assume that he's not letting his body smush, it'd be like this. That's why I always say we're going to stop it before we clap and hit, is to show you if the muscles change their direction, okay? And it's a limitation sometimes of trying to find these things. So in other words, two-dimensional picture of a three-dimensional concept. Let's just assume his arm is a little out in front of him, so he's not smacking him to the side of his body. Guys, I'm not saying that it's not hard to have it out here. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying anything at all. I'm saying to change your direction because of your muscles happens with his hands on the bottom. Gravity's not trying to make his hand go up. Your muscles have to make your hand go up. Your muscles are going to put on the brake and then put on the gas. And then once you have motion up here, gravity can bring you back down. But only your muscles can bring you up.
Would that be the same for the hip?
Let's do a hip exercise. It's all context, right? So in other words, we want to make sure we don't assume. So let's do, it can be the same for the hip, but it depends on the exercise. So let's do, so for this one, it would be the same because the cable's trying to adduct me, the same for the shoulder. But what if she turned herself around and the cable was trying to abduct her, right? Like if she rotated where the cable was trying to pull her leg out, well, then she would be needing muscles that are pulling her leg in. Does that make sense? So is it the same for the leg? It can be if the external force is trying to do the same thing for the leg, but it doesn't have to be if the external force is trying to do something else to you. Does that make sense? It's a great question. So watch. This one would be working hip abductors. Do we see why? Well, watch. Let's see if we could find one that would be. There we go. So this would be ab, but this would be working ad. This would be working ab. That would be working ab. This would be working ad. This is more consistent with what we were looking at. And I think this is I'm so glad you brought this up because it goes to show you it's not about the motion, right? It's about what is that machine or that exercise trying to do to it. So in this case, the machine is trying to abduct me. So I need adductors. Now, those muscles are great because most of them have adductor in the name. I wish they all did that. Adductor magnus, longus, brevis, chef's kiss. Thank you for naming them that. But not all of them have the directional pull in their name. Okay. Where's my concentric phase? When adductors adduct. Where's my eccentric phase? When adductors abduct. So what's going to be my plyometric sequence, assuming we don't clang, maintaining constant tension of the muscles? It's going to be when my muscles slow down the ab with eccentric, followed by speeding up the ad with concentric. Make sense? Sure. In this exercise, my plyometric sequence of slowing down and speeding up, brake and gas, is going to be when my adductors slow down the ab and then speed up the ad for this exercise. The machine can change my direction here, but only my muscles can change my direction here. That makes sense? The machine can do it here. Muscles have to do it there. All right, it's up to you. Does anybody have a specific exercise? Remember, guys, I'm not going to ask some crazy stuff. For the plyometric stuff, I'm not going to ask windshield wiper trunk stuff, okay? Just trying to introduce you to these concepts that plyometrics doesn't have to be box jumps. That could be a sprint. That could be on a continuum. That could be an extreme example of changing direction because of eccentric followed by concentric. But it could also be something like doing a slow and steady exercise through a slow and steady range of motion. You're still going to have a plyometric sequence. It just may not be as intense. It may not be as dangerous in terms of damage, but it's a continuum. We're good? All right, y'all have a good day.